guys, welcome. Wednesday night, I'm here for you live, and tonight I really wanted to talk about sugar, specifically what it's doing to our brains. And I really wanted to talk about this topic in particular because sugar is one of those things that, even though we know it's not good for us, people still have a hard time giving it up. So I really wanted to know, well, why, what's really going on, right? What's happening to our brain? And a lot of that because it's personal for me too. I have a huge issue giving up sugar myself. It's one of my things that if it's in the house, I'm going to eat it. And when I'm stressed, I'm going to eat it. And I know that too much sugar makes me crazy. It's what makes me bloat. It's what makes me gain weight. It's what makes my face break out. It's what makes my hormones go crazy. Like, I know that sugar is a link to a lot of my health issues, but it's still so hard for me to control it if it's in the house. So my method is don't keep it in the house, or controlled amounts. So if I need it, it's there, like controlled. If I'm really stressed, I have like something there, like small, that I can calm myself around. And also with that, why does sugar calm us down too? So this past week, what I did was I started delving into research and journal articles. Now, whenever I start talking about something that maybe I don't already know a lot about, like something like this, what I do is I actually do go into journal articles, like chemistry, not really chemistry, they're more like nutrition or biochemistry, health journal articles, actual research based stuff. Because I never want to talk about anything that there's not sort of validity to it, or there's not sort of research or science behind it. I don't just want to like just make stuff up. And whenever I look up something, I don't just do like a blind Google search either, because if you haven't noticed, anybody can put anything on the internet. So I purposely go for actual research, peer reviewed journals, and see what the science is and what people are finding out through actual research. So that's what I did this week. I actually was looking up specifically sugar and the brain and seeing what I learned from it. So I thought it would be fun to kind of share what I found this week. So before I get into really kind of maybe the more negative parts of sugar, I do want to talk about that briefly, that yes, we do need sugar to some extent, more specifically glucose. Now, this is something I really get into depth in my online nutrition course, Learn to Eat, which if you haven't yet already, put your name on the wait list now. It's free to put your name on the wait list, and because I want to see how many people I've interested before I actually release it, for real this summer. And then I can, obviously, you'll be the first to know when I release it and the details more specifically then. But put your name on the wait list now. But in that class, I really go over the different types of sugar, the different types of carbs, how they're all reacting in our body, what the different types are, what our body does to them, etc., etc., in a really good detail. But for tonight, I do want to emphasize the fact that yes, your body does technically need sugar, specifically the sugar glucose. This is the main sugar in our body. This is the main sugar that we eat. This is the one that your body actually wants. And the reason for that is because sugar is our body's main, no, sorry, glucose. I should specify glucose, because there's technically different types of sugars. But glucose in particular is the sugar your body wants for energy, and that's the thing that makes it happy. That's the thing that's converting into energy. That's the thing that's actually wanting. So when we talk about sugars, there's actually a whole range of sugars that we're eating. The main sugar that we do eat in our foods, like table sugar, is called sucrose. Sucrose is a glucose molecule attached to a fructose molecule. So it's actually two sugars bound together to make a new molecule called sucrose. That's our table sugar. That's most of the sugars that they add to foods, unless they specify something else. Like high fructose corn syrup is obviously mostly fructose. Agave syrup, mostly fructose. Things like that, those are a little bit different. But our everyday sugar, that's technically sucrose, which is glucose plus fructose bound together. Okay, what happens is when your body eats glucose, insulin is released Insulin is the hormone, and if you remember from my talk a couple weeks ago where I talked about the different hormones and what they are, insulin is basically the thing telling your body what to do with glucose. Basically telling your cells, hey, there's glucose here, you better suck it up and use it, right? That doesn't happen with fructose, okay? That's why I don't really like to eat foods that are, or sugars that are just more heavily fructose based, like high fructose corn syrup or agave. And I actually did a video about agave syrup. If you go to my YouTube channel on my website, you can find that video about why I don't believe agave is a healthier alternative, and it's because it's primarily fructose. Because there's no insulin release with fructose, it actually tricks your brain a little bit more. You need that insulin release to tell your body that there's food there and that your cells should use it. It also just suppresses your appetite and controls your appetite, so you actually stop eating because you have food there and you don't need to eat anymore. So that's what you need, that insulin release, in order for that to happen. So that's really the nutshell of why technically, yes, you need sugar. The problem is, though, they're putting sugar in literally everything. So if you buy any processed food, there's sugar in it, right? Most of our sugars are coming from obviously sweets or sodas, energy drinks. Apparently, I have a crap ton of sugar. I don't drink energy drinks. Actually, my husband brought one home the other day and I read it. There was something like 38 grams of sugar in it. And if you do the math, so 4 grams is about 1 teaspoon. So you can kind of calculate, right? So like 38 grams, that's, we'll just say roughly 10 teaspoons of sugar in like a thing of an energy drink. I was like, don't drink that. So much freaking sugar. Anyway, that's just like, so if you're drinking energy drinks, you might want to reconsider. Same thing with sodas, because it's just basically pure sugar. And the problem with that is the heavy amount of sugar in your body, and then long term what's happening as a result. So the research I found, a lot of it had to do with long term effects of eating things that are mostly sugar. Now what they found is it was mostly things, it wasn't really with things that were like, if you're eating sugar or carbs with like a protein or fat, like a balanced meal, then the effects were more minimal, or they didn't see anything at all. The effects that they saw, the negative effects, were more or less associated with things that were 100% sugar or more primarily very high sugar based things. So that's something to also keep in mind too. So when you're eating sugar, your body does release a bunch of hormones that help your body reduce stress, right? They found that sugar binds to, in your brain, the serotonin in your brain, and serotonin is a hormone that actually makes you feel good, right? So that explains why when you're stressed and you reach for sugar, you're actually doing something your brain's telling you will help calm you down and help make you happy. So it's not your fault, it's just brain chemistry. So your sugar is actually literally telling your brain through chemistry everything is calm, and you're releasing these feel-good hormones as a result of eating sugar. So that's why people, when they're stressed, like me, they tend to reach for sugar when they're stressed because of that effect, right? However, they also saw that long-term high sugar use is actually associated with depression. So even though in the moment you're having like, a stress release in the moment, but long term, if you're constantly doing this high sugar diet, long term, it's actually really linked to depression. And I even noticed that with myself, more or less with anxiety. I'm very prone to being anxious, and I have anxiety problems. I've always talked about this many times. That's part of my health issues, is just managing my anxiety. And part of that management really is minimizing my sugar. And that's because I've seen personally was that if I eat a lot of sugar for, in like a block of time, my anxiety levels start to get worse. So it's when I start cutting it back that I'm able to calm myself down. But for people who might be prone to depression, it's something to consider too, is to really look at your diet and how much sugar you're putting into, because you might actually be increasing the probability of depression even more. They also saw that that sugar. Oh, I'm losing my notes; they're falling down. Um, that high sugar, is also linked to more fatigue and less alertness, right? And I think that makes sense because I've, even myself and through talking to other people, because I have done food journaling with clients and also my students where I've had them track what they're eating and I've had them track basically how they're feeling throughout the day too. And a lot of them come back to me and say that they feel tired after eating like high carbs or sugar and that they feel like blah, right? So the science does support that a high sugar diet is also linked to just being tired more, right? And also feeling like less alert, like less motivated. You know what I mean? Like they've shown that to be actually true. So if you feel like after a heavy meal on carbs or sugar, you're tired, you're not alone. That's actually what science is telling you is true also. And so what was really interesting to me is I saw more of the chemistry behind that. And I will explain it to you in perfect layman's terms if I can. But there is a amino acid called tryptophan. You might have heard tryptophan. It's always associated with turkey for some reason. Tryptophan is an amino acid. And if you remember my protein talk, and if you haven't seen it, go back and look at that video, that proteins, the building blocks of proteins are amino acids. So there's 20 of them. One of them is called tryptophan. That's just one of the amino acids that's found in proteins that we eat. Okay. Now, tryptophan we need, it makes serotonin. It's the precursor molecule to make serotonin in our body. And it's also the precursor molecule to make melatonin. So if you don't know what melatonin is, or yeah, melatonin. Yeah, that's the one. Did I write to say the right one? That's the one that makes us sleep better, right? Interesting, right? So they've linked high carb, high sugar diets to an increase in tryptophan in our blood, and they've seen that an increase of tryptophan in our blood, there's more serotonin in our blood, and I would also argue that there's probably more melatonin in your system too, which is probably why you feel tired more, brain foggy more, less alert, and just like, ugh, you know what I mean? It's because of those things. I thought that was very interesting. Um, However, they saw that if they added protein to the diet, they didn't see these effects. So that also, I think, demonstrates the need to have a balanced diet or balanced meals, especially, and to not eat these high sugar things all by themselves. To make sure that if you're eating sugar or carbs, to really balance them with fat and protein and, a complete meal, because then you don't get these effects. They've also shown that sugar is literally changing your brain chemistry. And they've done this with like brain mapping. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist or a brain scientist at all. So, from the gist that I could understand, they actually did a brain mapping scans where they can show changes in their brains, right? And they saw that sugar was literally changing the parts of their brain that have to do with learning, that have to do with memory, that have to do with impulse control, right? So I already talked about people eating sugar leading to like having that brain fog, kind of mushy brain feeling, right? So that makes sense because your brain's literally being changed, in addition to the tryptophan, right? So you have like two things happening that are contributing. And impulse control. That's why people who eat sugar, they kind of have a hard time stop eating sugar, and it's why it's so hard to break that habit. It's not your fault. Your brain chemistry literally has changed. So the impulse control, if you don't have impulse, you can't control what you're doing, right? And that leads to overeating, right? Which is why high sugar, high carb diet is so strongly linked to obesity, right? It might not necessarily be their fault, right? They lost, or not, their ability to control what they're eating has decreased because their brain chemistry has changed, right? That's why high sugar is now being associated with addictive behavior, because the changes in their brains that they saw were the same changes that addicts also have, right? People with addictive behaviors also have. So literally you're addicted to sugar. It's literally the same mechanisms happening in your brain. So it's not your fault that you can't get rid of the sugar habit. Literally your brain is telling you that it wants sugar, that it's very, very difficult. And that's why it keeps us in this cycle of, we know it's bad but we can't stop. And you know, and obviously we know that too much sugar is leading to possibly increased weight and health problems, all these things, and it's like mentally screwing with us because we know that this is the cause, but it's just how do we help ourselves, right? So my advice for right now is, and my, obviously it's coming from personal experience too, the less you eat sugar, the easier it is to break. Now, I would not cold turkey it at all. And I even before I knew the actual science, I've always told my clients never cold turkey stopping sugar, never, because I always knew that there was an addiction, piece to sugar. So you never want to cold turkey it, right? That, because then you'll get into withdrawal symptoms, and then you're just going to possibly relapse, or it'll be really, really hard. So it just doesn't make sense. Never cold turkey sugar, especially if you know that you eat a lot of sugar now. I would always, you're going to do a slow cutback, right? Slowly decreasing it out of your diet. And this is why, for me, whenever I go through like a binge of a lot of sugar, within a couple weeks, because usually for me, it's usually during like a time that's like really stressful for me. Like the last time I really noticed it was when I was pregnant, because me being pregnant, especially this last time, was very stressful on me. Physically, I was just so uncomfortable. On top of just chasing a toddler, working, it was just a lot at once. And I knew in the moment I was reaching for sugar a lot. So when I cut back, in order for me to cut back, what I did was I was still buying it, but I wasn't buying as much. And I just was trying to emphasize more fruits and, dark chocolate. All of like the things that they're supposed to do. But they say those things because really, really, really do help. So you just gotta slowly cut back. And it wasn't, like I said, I still had candy in the house. I just didn't have as much, right? And I still was eating ice cream, just not as much. When I mean not as much, is I just didn't buy as much, right? Smaller portions. Again, that's what worked for me. And again, this is something that I do work really close with my clients on how to help them personally in their own personal situations. Because what works for me might not work for you or for somebody else. That's why when I talk to my clients about decreasing sugar, I really look at what they're doing in their life and what makes sense for them to change, right? What makes sense to me might not make sense to you, right? So I really help them figure out what would make sense in their personal situation, right? So I do that in my one-on-one coaching. So if you know that you have like a problem decreasing sugar, or whatever it is, whatever you think you might have an issue with trying to figure out. Again, sugar, we know now, it's not your fault. Your brain literally is screwing with you. That's why I called this why sugar is making your brain crazy, because it just is. It's not our fault. But you can fix it. It takes help. It might take support, and that's my job as a coach too, is to be that support and to be that help and that guide and just accountability with you, and to help you with your own personal situation. So if you feel like you need that, let me know. You can personally message me or go to my website and just set up a free appointment. Again, all my initial consultations are free. I just want to have like initial chit chat. But again, it can be done, and it's not your fault. And sometimes it just takes a little help too. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. And I thought that might have been interesting too. Again, I found the science to be interesting. And yeah, I think that's basically it. So I really think you should go to my website, put your name on the wait list for the nutrition course, because then you can learn all about sugar and all about carbs. And if you need help with eating sugar or how to figure out how to navigate that better, you know, send me a message and maybe we can have a talk and we can set up just an initial consult and maybe I can help you figure this out. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I will see you all same place next week. Okay, bye.